Okay. Um, Talk 14. We are talking about misalignment. So, the actual title of the talk is Misalignment when vibes are off and you don't go. When the vibes are off and you don't go. And I have like favorite words that I like because when I say them, when I use them, or when I hear them, they inspire certain things. And I'm always looking to be inspired by the people around me, by what I do, by what I watch, what I read, what I see. That's like a really big deal for me. I don't do things just to do them. And one of the words that I love is alignment, right? I like the word because of how it sounds, but also because of what it means, right? And for me, alignment is when things are so properly placed, when everything is so properly placed that everything works in harmony. And I think that that's a beautiful thing. Something that I struggle with understanding is when people try to explain it to me is the idea that happiness is something that you obtain and you keep, right? And the reason why I struggle with that is because I think that your happiness is usually directly related to, oh my God, and there's like so much sun coming in right now. Um, your happiness is directly related to how aligned you are in areas of your life. How are the areas of your life working together to bring harmony to you? And the closer you are to that, the closer you are to happiness. So the more aligned you are, the closer to happiness you are. And at points of my life when I have felt happy is when things have aligned so well. So, the opposite of that is misalignment, right? And misalignment is not a happy place to be. Um, and misalignment for me is when what you're doing doesn't match who you are, or where you are doesn't match who you want to be or what you want to do. So things are contradicting. And I think that some of the easiest ways that we can see misalignment is when you're in environments that you don't belong. You're around people and you're looking around and you're saying, oh my God, what am I doing here, right? Whether it's because of how the people are presenting or the type of people they are or what's being discussed. I always say it's really difficult for me to want to be at tables where people look like me. I would much rather be at tables where people think like me. It doesn't make me uncomfortable to be the only Black Latina at a table, or to be the only female at a table, or to be the only non-American at a table, right? It doesn't make me uncomfortable, but I am way more uncomfortable when I am in circles of people that don't think like me, right? And I think that that's a good example of misalignment. When you're looking at the things that are being talked about or the things that are being done, and you're turning around and you're like, this is not me. What am I doing here? Right? And it could be just you and one other person or you and a group of people. It doesn't really matter. You can be misaligned in relationships as well. So it's become, where I am in my life, it's become really important for me to try to do things that are in accordance with who I think I am. And some people might be listening to this and say, well, if you're being honest and you're being genuine, right, about yourself, then who you are, you don't have to try to be. You don't have to try to be who you are if it's really who you are, right? And I agree with that to a certain extent. And I say to a certain extent because I think that there are things that happen to us or things that we make happen in our life that may kind of muddy that clarity for us. And I think that there are times where we lose sight of who we are. It doesn't mean that we don't know who we are. It doesn't mean that we're not comfortable with who we are, but we lose sight of who we are. And, you know, what usually happens when that happens to us is that our friends or the people that have known us very long are saying like, Nat, what the hell? That's not even like you, right? When you start hearing those type of phrases, that's when you need to tap in and be like, what's that about, right? Because not to say that the people around you are definitely right, but definitely to say that it's something that kind of needs extra attention. Because I think that this is especially true when we are experiencing grief or deep sadness or when we are in a transition in our life that might be difficult. When we are going through those things, we kind of lose ourselves a little bit, sometimes for too long. And what happens is that when those things are happening, decision making doesn't stop, right? The bills don't stop, school doesn't stop, work doesn't stop, family doesn't stop, right? Your business doesn't stop. None of those things stop, as well as the things that you need to feel complete. You still have those basic needs. So because those things don't stop, you are sometimes forced to respond and react. And those reactions and responses may take you to decisions that are not specific to who you are. They might be just circumstantial. They might be what was available to you at the time. And that can lead to misalignment, right? That's when you hear people saying, I don't know what's happening with her. I don't know what's happening with him. Nobody can explain it. People that have known you a very long time. But they're judging you against what they've known without considering what you're going through. And you know, it's a very dangerous place. I think that people can come out of that. I think that there are ways that people can align so that they are the truest to themselves. It's funny because not long ago, me and one of my friends were talking about like what are our current lessons, right? In the seasons that we're in, what is it that we are learning? And one of the things that I was talking to her about was that, you know how people say sometimes, you know, becoming who I want to be, becoming this or achieving these goals. Well, I wonder how it would be to, instead of becoming, to unbecome, right? And what I mean by unbecome is that sometimes I think that the season that we could be in, if we're not sure what it is we want to become, is unbecoming the things that are not like us, the things that are not authentic to us. Those things that you picked up while you were in crisis, or those things that you picked up while you were grieving a big loss or you were grieving a big transition, those things that you basically had to do to quote unquote survive, like we say, if they're not serving you anymore, you don't have to carry that, right? We don't have to carry that. We can unbecome those things and return to who we are, which I think is what we organically do anyway. I think that, you know, sometimes I hear people say, listen, if this doesn't work in this business, I'm never going to work with anybody again, right? I'm not going to take on another business partner and start another business. Or if this relationship doesn't work, I'm done with women. I'm done with men. I don't want to do. I just want to be by myself. And I think that because we've all done that, right? And I think that the problem with those type of statements is that we're saying it in a moment of struggle, in a moment of crisis, in a moment of something went wrong, right? That caused us to say that. That statement usually isn't true when we allow time to pass and we heal and we grow and we change. And I think that's the unbecoming part, right? Unbecoming the things that served you when you were in a different place. Now those things don't serve you anymore. You don't have to be that, right? Whatever it is. You don't have to be guarded. You don't have to be cautious. You don't have to do these things because you're not in that space anymore. You can relax your nervous system and you can return to who you were. And I think that that's alignment, right? Sometimes alignment is unbecoming. And I think that why I think that alignment is so important is because misalignment can do a lot to your mental health and to your physical health. People underestimate the impact of someone saying, "Yeah, I'm fine, I'm just pushing through." Right? You have to watch those type of phrases because when someone is just pushing through, there's still a lot of things that can be really wrong in other areas. They might be pushing through at work, they might be pushing through at home, they might be pushing through with family. But when you look at how they're feeling, their overall satisfaction of themselves, sometimes there's a lot of red flags with that. And that's what I think is dangerous about misalignment. I think that when you stay in environments that you don't belong in, or when you're acting or doing things that contradict who you are, so many things will show up, right? Headaches, stomach aches, trouble sleeping, the grief of what you want things to look like and they don't will creep up even if you think you're making a good decision. Or even if I see this a lot when people make sacrifices, right? When people may say, well, I had to do it for my kids, right? If what you're doing for your kids doesn't align with who you are or what you see for yourself, whew, that is anxiety coming up, headaches, disconnection from things that you enjoy, right? All that stuff happens. I think I had mentioned in a previous recording that, 2024 was a very big year of transitions for me. And 2025 was also a big year, but it was a different kind of year than 2024 because 2024, it was kind of like I had a veil in front of my eyes, and it felt kind of like I could see my way through, right? Because, with a veil usually has some type of way that you can see, right? It's not completely clear, like you can't see details, but you can see where you're going. You can see where you're walking. You can see what's in front of you. And I feel like that was 2024 for me. 2024 was a veil year for me because I was in a transition where I was very focused on doing certain things for the betterment of my family, right? For the betterment of the bigger picture. And I was missing the small details. The veil didn't let me see the small details. I didn't want to take the time to see, well, okay, Nat, if you do that, in a few years, we might be feeling the consequence of that. You might feel good now and today, but in a few years, it's not going to look okay. I was missing that. And then 2025 came, and 2025 came with a lot of abrupt disappointment, I think I could say. But in 2025, I've become very, very grateful because I think that 2025 is when clarity came from the veil of 2024. I got a lot of clarity in 2025. And I bring this up because I think that I was very misaligned in 2024. I think that my misalignment surprised me. And what started happening, it's interesting because what started happening towards the end of 2024 and in the beginning of 2025 was exactly what I talked about. I was having trouble sleeping. I wasn't at peace. I found myself wondering about a lot of things, questioning things that I had chosen for myself, and I was questioning, right? And that's a very hard place to be at when you're questioning choices that you made, right? Because that starts tapping into your confidence, your security. When you question things that happen to you, that's a little different, right? You can try to place the blame on the universe, a higher power, or whoever did whatever they did. But when what's happening to you is the sum of the choices that you made, that's tough. And I think that that is what happened to me. And in 2025, I've been working a lot on forgiving myself for the choices that I made in 2024, right? Overlooking who people really were, kind of not prioritizing what I knew was good for me. And I was misaligned, right? I was in company that I shouldn't have been in, that wasn't good for me. I was in environments where, okay, you clearly know you're too good for this. What are you doing here? Right? What are you doing here? In the space of people who took me for granted, who didn't appreciate what I had been at that point. And that's misalignment. And, as you become aligned, so the thing is, right, how do you get from misalignment to alignment? How do you become aligned? And it's funny because I think that the first step is one of the hardest things for you to do because it actually takes us having the insight that we're misaligned. So if you don't have the insight that you're misaligned, it's going to be pretty hard for you to start. But I think what has to happen is once you start noticing, yeah, I'm not in sync with what's going on in my life. I got to tap in and try to align myself. You got to pause. What does that mean? You can't make big decisions in that space. That space is not about achievements. It's not about outcomes. You've got to put, whatever goals you have for your savings account on hold, whatever goals you have for your business on hold, for your brand, for your children. It's that space where you just have to go through the routine of the day-to-day to get things done, but you can't make big changes and big decisions until you align yourself. And that takes insight. You're going to have to do a lot and a lot of self-work, right? You are going to have to, after you understand that you are misaligned, you're going to have to take a beat, do the self-work, and then come back around to those things that you put on hold. And that taps into our patience. And we never really want to, those of us that are patient don't want to become any more patient. And those of us that are impatient, we don't want to be patient at all. So, but that type of work, that type of self-work, it takes time, and it takes, doing course correction. Course correction, let me tell you, I'm a Taurus and I am stubborn. Well, I'm a child of God first, but as I am a child of God, I am a Taurus. And I will tell you that course correct for me is very difficult because I am the type of person that I want to stick with it until I make it work. And until the thing is looking at me and saying, it doesn't work, Nat, I am still. So, course correct is very difficult. It requires a lot of flexibility and a lot of self work. But it's something that I'm working on. It's something that I'm working on. And then you wonder, right? If misalignment causes headaches, if misalignment causes anxiety, if it causes disconnection, if it causes all these things, then why do we stay there? Why isn't it easier to just reject all those things and move forward into alignment? And I think that it's a lot of different reasons for different people, but I think that some of the things that come up is fear, right? Fear of what happens when I let this go. I'm not sure, right? It could be fear that I have the capacity to live up to my alignment. Maybe the self-confidence is too low for me to course correct and come back around, right? I think there's also a worry of what will come of that, right? If we all talked about, and we've talked about this in all our groups, right? With family, with friends, with coworkers, change brings out a loss of things, right? So if you go from being misaligned and you're having some reward in that space, naturally, when you become aligned, you're going to lose those rewards. Even if they were 2 or 3, you're going to lose those rewards. And it's natural to feel that way. So I think that the worry of like, well, I'm enjoying that. So if I become aligned, will I still keep it? I think that's very natural. And I also think that comfort, right? Listen, and I hope this catches. I was misaligned for like a year and a half. That's time where I gained some type of comfort in the space that I was in. So we could argue and say that's good, that's bad, that's in between, but it is what it is. It is what it is. There is a comfort even in our bad ways. So I think that the courageous and the strong and the brave thing, I tell my kids all the time, be brave, right? I tell them even when they're not going through something new, be brave. So I think that to go from, if you can spot that you are misaligned in any areas of your life, even if it's 1 or 2 and the other 3 are okay, you've got to seek the alignment of all, because you'd be surprised. Once you become aligned with your career goals, your personal relationships start improving. Your relationships with your family start improving. So aligning yourself in all areas, it's like the planets. When they align, everything is going well, right? That's what science says, right? It's the same thing. When you align all the areas of your life and you do it successfully, I think we often do see improvements. And when I've looked at those spaces of my life, when things have aligned, absolutely, things have worked very, very well, right? You might have some hiccups, you might have some regular life stuff, but the satisfaction of myself, with myself and the people around me, that has always been optimal. So that's misalignment. Let me know what you think. DM me, put some comments in there. I also wanted to talk about, I didn't get any questions about the last talk that I had, but I did have someone in my personal life that asked me a question about what I posted. So I thought it was an interesting question. So the question was, it sounds like it wasn't the talk, it was a mini talk. It was a mini talk that I posted. And what he said was, it sounds like you're supporting men being aggressive. this was the mini talk that I had about masculine energy. And I'm not really sure if I agree that aggressive, the trait of aggressive, being an aggressive person is bad, because I think that a lot of times people use it interchangeably with assertive. When you hear someone say, "Oh, she's aggressive, he's aggressive," and you ask them to break it down, a lot of times what they mean is assertive. And I feel like when I hear someone say aggressive, I need to know more, because I don't think that that in and of itself is negative. So in my talk, I did describe how I am more interested in men who are aggressive. And I stand by that, right? And I don't think that I am talking about physical aggression. Like, I don't think well, I know for a fact I'm not talking about violent behaviors and violent actions, right? I'm talking about aggressive with what they want, right? With reaching their goals. So for me, an aggressive, and I posed the example of the young man who said to me, "I don't approach women," right? I don't think that I could be attracted to a man that doesn't approach women. I think that that is an aggressive trait. Now, how he approaches, right? How he approaches is very different. I'm not condoning and I'm not encouraging that men are physically aggressive to approach women. That's not what I'm saying. But a man who comes up to you at an event, or initiates and expresses an interest in you, I think that's very attractive. And I think that is an aggressive trait. Same thing with business, right? There are men who will sit and allow someone else to come up with an idea. I think that a more assertive, aggressive trait is a man who initiates that. That's the one I want. I don't want the one who supported the idea. I want the one who initiated the idea. And that's what I mean. We had a good conversation about it, and I think that he understood what I meant. But to be clear, when I said that, I wasn't speaking about violent behavior. I think that a lot of times men that are hunters, men that are alpha males, men that are more aggressive, they get this idea, and I talked about it in the recording, that women want that, but then they don't want to hear them if they get loud, or they don't want their affection to be aggressive. And I do think that's difficult. I understand why a lot of my ladies may not want that, but you have to understand that if, like I said in the recording, that if this is the type of male that you like, some of this behavior is going to come out. And it may mean working together in your feminine energy and his masculine energy so that it syncs nicely. Because I also think that, I am 100% sure that the men in my life who've gotten the most feminine energy from me are absolutely the men that have been the most masculine. So however your masculine energy comes through impacts a lot in how her feminine energy comes through. So in case you were wondering, like my friend was. Okay, see you at the next talk.